Awesome. Everybody, welcome back. Well, to another episode. Thanks for tuning in here. I'm in with Calvin Holt, co-founder and CEO of DrillDocs. Calvin is an oil and gas professional with over 35 years of industry experience working for companies such as Weatherford, Tesco, Chevron. Calvin, welcome to the show. You've got a beautiful background, which is much better than mine. If you're listening on audio, you can't see it, but Calvin came prepared. He's got his DrillDocs shirt on. He's got the background. And you're ready to hit the road here, aren't you, man?
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. Yeah, my background, I can't take credit for that. I'm at the Access Communications Experience Center here down in City Center, Houston.
Beautiful. Actually, I've spent quite a bit of time in City Center myself. It's a good place to hang out with for whether it be networking or they had the Permian Operators Forum, I think, there not too long ago. I was there, but anyway, nice little center there. Is that where your guys' office is, or do you guys just work out of there? Or?
We come in for demo days. In fact, I'm here after this presentation. Access has something called Site Designer that we use to calibrate our cameras to different locations. So wow. we're working through some of this stuff with them. They've been great on the technology integration part.
Very cool. Very cool. And so it's funny, actually, this must be a Chevron drilling alumni month for me or something. Cause the last guest I had, she had over about, I think it was around 10 years of Chevron or over at Chevron in a bunch of different drilling roles. Do you know Christine Guerrero?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I had her on last week actually. And she is such a unique individual with lots of experience, and what she's doing now is exciting, but just a ball of energy.
Well, I have a lot of fond memories of my time at Chevron, and it's a world-class organization, obviously, but the people are honestly what make it go. Yes. They have that tagline, human energy, which I always bought into. I think it's great. I think it's a great tagline.
Yeah. True. No, it is. And, a lot of people, and again, oil and gas, energy in itself, I wouldn't say, I mean, in every industry, people bounce around, but in oil and gas, you see people come and go. It's a small world. You may work with someone in some place, and then 5 years later, they're in a different space. And then all of a sudden you're working together, and it was really neat. But what I've noticed over time, and I've, been in this since 2004. So I've come across a few people, is people that end up at Chevron typically stay there for quite a while. I have a good friend of mine up in Canada, Jeff Kidd, who's on the completion side. He worked for Apache, and then he's been with Chevron. And I went to college with him, and I would have never thought he would have worked for a large company. He's one of those sort of against the grain, rule benders, if you will, but all for good intent. And just the corporate structure, it never struck me as something that aligned with sort of the way he operated. But he's been there for several years now, and just absolutely loves it. But no, again, I think Chevron's a great company. They represent our industry well, especially here in the U.S. They're coming off a hot year, which is exciting, just like many. And I look forward to the US majors continuing to make good strides in our industry.
And it's fascinating to watch them sort of retrench from the overseas approach to a lot more, let's say, America's based. It's interesting, the risk profile, et cetera. So yeah, a lot more work for us here, which is great.
Yeah, it is. I actually, and not to deviate, but when I was in grad school, I wrote a paper on the business strategies comparing the U.S. majors to the European majors, and incorporating, the financials and sort of really just comparing, where they were and where they're at now and their futures. And it was really fascinating. It really gave me a good understanding of here in the U.S., how well we've done, the two, Chevron, Exxon, over time, they've performed very well. And so again, lots to look forward to. They're diving into a lot of cool energy verticals. And I always, I've seen some buzz lately, and this is probably just a bunch of headline silliness, but is because of our here in the US, our performance is one of the majors here scooping up one of the majors in Europe. Do you ever see that happening?
No. I think a culture thing would basically prevent that.
Sure.
That'd be the hardest thing. What Noble was, I think, the last Chevron that I can remember. I may have lost track, and that got them the Israel offshore play, which was a big one.
Right.
So strategically maybe, but a small European, yeah, maybe, sure, why not?
Yeah. Right.
I
If it
think
makes,
Cairn's up for sale.
say that again. Sorry.
Cairn,
Ah, okay.
CAIRN. They're a pretty innovative, independent European based. I can't think they're UK based. Anyway,
Interesting. Yeah. No,
I
yeah.
spent a lot of time overseas, so I hope we could talk a little bit about that. That's kind of where my background started, even as a 3-year-old. So
Really? Okay. Well, we're going to touch on that because I
yeah,
always like to hear the story. But before we do that, I do need to make an announcement to tell everyone about my new sponsor, which is Inflow Control. They're a technology company that helps oil companies improve the efficiency of oil production while reducing the industry's environmental impact with their autonomous inflow control valve technology. This breakthrough technology improves oil production by reducing unwanted gas and water, which enables mature fields to be more profitable by supporting oil production from zones that would have typically been bypassed. This provides oil companies and its stakeholders with lower carbon oil and higher profitability. To learn more, click the link in the show notes or simply check them out on LinkedIn or at inflowcontrol.no. So Calvin, I mean, we started getting into it. You said your journey starts way back when you were 3 years old overseas. I mean, are you one of those stories where you were with your dad on a drilling rig when you were 3, or I mean, what does this look like?
My dad, he likes to tell the story how it took him 3 attempts to join Schlumberger as a wireline logging engineer, 1960 something. And he eventually got success. And after a couple of hurricanes in Houma, Louisiana, I was born in Buras. Mom and dad said there's got to be a better place to go. Opened up the Schlumberger employee handbook and saw the location coefficient for Libya and said, that's where we want to go. So that was 1965. And it was, almost 15 years of overseas duty. It was great. It was great.
What's your fondest memory of being over there?
Well, my biggest memory, I don't know if I have a lot of memories of Libya, I guess from 3 to 6. We had to leave because of Gaddafi in 69. So I remember Wheeler Air Force Base being emergency evacuated there, waiting to fly to France is where they took us. So that's a vivid memory.
No kidding.
I remember the pizza too. The Italians had Libya for a while, so the pizza was really good.
Okay, well, I mean, what's pizza choice? What is it?
Oh, it's got to be. I call it diavolo. It's the sort of a spicy meat. The other one that I'll recommend is tuna and onion, tuna e cipolla, and that's a weird one, but I met my wife in Italy and she introduced me to that. So those are my 2 favorite pizzas.
Well, I have a soft spot for tuna. As a roughneck, when we were, and here's why. I was getting a $25 a day per diem. And so I would find the cheapest food I could eat, obviously, because I wanted to pocket if I could, 10, 15 bucks. So I ate tuna and hot dog buns for quite a long time. Yeah. And to this day, if I don't have lunch with a client, I got cans of tuna at the office. And knock it back. It doesn't fill me up to a point where I need to go to sleep, but it fills me up enough to keep going. So I love, and of course I love tuna fresh off the boat too. I mean, whether it be in a can or off the Keys of Florida, I'm in.
I'm with you. I didn't actually know there was any other kind of tuna other than Starkid until I went to Italy and it got introduced to that, and I was like, wow, I'm with you though. I guess I broke out I did roughnecking and cleaner painter work.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the Starkist bring your own lunch.
Yeah. Beautiful.
A lot of salad dressing. I think you need. What was it? The whip. See, what's the mayonnaise? Miracle Whip.
Miracle Whip. Yeah. You slop some Miracle Whip on some tuna. That's a delicacy, man. I know. Exactly. Well, so again, obviously you've been all over the world. How did you get started in energy and oil and gas? I mean, it seems like it's, kind of was part of your, I guess, family orientation, but yeah, I'm curious how you got into it and then how you ended up getting into the drilling space and if that was a passion or kind of just happened to be. I mean, tell us the story there.
Well, okay, so Dad was Schlumberger, family history there is Oklahoma Sooner. That's the Oklahoma side. So oil and gas and I guess entrepreneurship's always kind of been there. My younger brother, Garrett, he's also in the oil field. He's up in Calgary too, with a fairly large independent. I in high school, so we're talking 1980, right? You take your aptitude test, you had your selective service that maybe you were going to get drafted kind of thing. And I can honestly say the only real deviation in my career path from oil and gas would have been military, Air Force. I like to fly. I've done some flying, but no, it was always oil and gas. I think the money and the international lifestyle and just the sheer dynamic nature of it, just part of my personality. I enjoyed. Changed a lot of jobs within the same company, always on the technology side.
Yeah.
At school, I went to Montana Tech. I couldn't handle reservoir. I didn't have the aptitude to do the reservoir engineering. It was too black arty for me.
Yeah.
Drilling just seemed something that I could put my hands. I'm a very visual person, so the drilling part I liked.
Yeah, no, I can identify with you. I, in school and stuff, reservoir engineering and geology is far too abstract and too many lofty assumptions. And I was never good at art either. So, I found that, just, again, similarly to you, I found, being on a rig and understanding drilling operations, I could tie that into, well, now I'm in the drilling fluids world, but I can very much identify sort of with you on that. And so spending, again, you've spent, you went through several ups and downs, several, cycles, ups, downs, you name it, being exposed to that stuff. And now we're in this, however you want to label it, any transition, energy expansion, whatever you want to call it, depending on what headline you read. But at the end of the day, there's incentive there's incentive to try and get away from fossil fuels, right?
Sure.
And, in debatable topic, of course, but the reality is energy demand is there. Global oil demand, I don't suspect has peaked. If it's going to happen soon, so be it. But I'm curious from your perspective, do you have any core beliefs around energy that you've changed your mind on over the last few years? Does anything kind of resonate with you there?
Wow, it's pretty deep, huh? I don't think the fundamental physics have changed. I believe that the media has floated this balloon about the pending climate crisis that a lot of people have bought into, and I'm not smart enough to know if they're right or wrong. I just know from, let's say, an engineer's point of view, we have to be practical and we have to plan a transition. I mean, you can't doubt that we pollute. There's no doubt, but for the greater good of things. And so balancing that greater good versus this very nebulous calculation that somehow we are changing the earth in real time to catastrophic effect. I'm not there. So,
sure.
But at the same time, I am client focused, and that's what their shareholders are. So, I firmly, believe that our industry is so important to mankind. We need to make it acceptable to mankind. And so I want to make it sustainable. And that's kind of what one of our, I guess, core principles is that we want, we can be so much more efficient at drilling, as you well know, Justin. Yeah. That could be a whole nother discussion, which would probably be more negative than positive. So Let's keep a positive face on it. And that's what we're trying to do, is to bring solutions that our community can try to make them more efficient.
Right. And that was kind of the leading into this is why I brought that up. And mainly because obviously if someone like yourself is saying, well, no, where this is exactly true and we need to get away from it. Clearly you've got a passion and sort of, let's call it a bullish outlook on the drilling activity, because that's everything that you guys are doing over at DrillDocs is based around drilling. And so, I'm curious, and we'll get into what you're doing, but through your time in the drilling space and kind of looking forward, are there any trends, so on a macro level, that you're seeing in drilling that really excite you as we move forward into getting out of this? Going into, in my opinion, a pretty good long bull cycle and lots of activity coming in down the pipeline.
Sure. Well, you're sort of a scout for technology, and as much grief as our industry gets for being sort of latecomers to it, which is not all unjust. I'm active in SPE's drilling systems automation technical section. So, the whole idea of digitalization and automating the drilling and completion practices, I think we all recognize can be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole career, Justin's been pretty much trying to get develop and implement emerging technology. In the early days, it was single trip whipstocks way back when Weatherford was pioneering that. And now sort of MPD is now managed pressure drilling is a fairly household word now. The deep water drillers are finally enabling their rigs to do that. 5-7 years ago, it was still a hard sell. Mm-hmm. So when we show it, we do it. And so if we can show the value, it eventually comes around, and that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Automation for the sake of automation, that's always a double-edged sword, but I do believe that's where we're going.
Yeah, no, that's a challenging discussion that we have within our organization is how much effort and resources to put into drilling fluid automation. And again, this is, you're tied into this world now, which kind of, it sort of makes me beg the question. And, you've spent lots of years in the drilling world, exposed to so many different parts of the drilling operation. I would say directional has come a long way, and they've really made leaps and bounds. And then, drilling, the drilling contractor world, all these sensors, and you can track so many things real time. For you, Calvin, why tackle hole cleaning and wellbore stability as your core problem?
Because it was a personal pain point.
Okay.
I have the classic. Okay, why would you invest in DrillDocs? Does the domain expert or the founder have any experience in it? And fortunately or unfortunately, I did, to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. Our business unit suffered because of frankly wellbore instability, which turns into a hole cleaning problem. So yeah, I've got that, and it was one of those, because of my background in sort of emerging technologies. I was a bit incredulous that we hadn't come to the idea that computer vision could be something that we could try. Just the poor shell shakers, as you well know, are the word commodity is actually a compliment to them, because they're called a lot worse.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so, Calvin, to educate the audience, because I've got folks from all walks of, whether it be oil and gas or even energy, can you sort of give an outline as to, because we talk shakers, and so would you mind just describing, as you're drilling, how that sort of that cycle works of pumping fluid down, it comes up, you've got rocks, and then where you guys kind of fit into that, circulation, if you will.
Okay. Well, so you're right. As the rocks are coming out with the fluid, the drilling mud, we've got really sort of three things we're looking for: the fluid itself, and then we can just divide the rocks into two categories: cuttings, which derived by the bit, and the bad actors are the cavings, which the hole is giving us, and we don't want them to. So look at it as sort of facial recognition for rocks coming across the shaker to determine the volume, the size, and the shape. And with those data points, we can inform the drilling team how, is the hole being cleaned to their model expectation or not. And same for the geomex. Is their windows, mud window, pressure profile windows accurate?
So how would you describe the traditional, or I guess existing way of analyzing that, and put yourself in, say, call it a, whether from the operator's perspective, as a mud guy, I can, obviously allude to it, but I'm curious from an operator's perspective, when they're either watching Pason or, on-site representatives, they're at the rig site watching all this stuff happen. How does it typically happen? And then how would you like, or how are you guys essentially creating a better way of doing that?
That question can go from both extremes, Justin, as you well know, depending on where you are. But
of course,
you said the operator, which is intriguing because, there's the remote center operator, and they might have some models that are working on cuttings bed height and modeling that. I would offer that 9 times out of 10, anybody on the rig floor, company man, don't have access to that. And the ones that do, I'm not sure they actually use it to make any hard decisions without support from a remote center. So it's a difficult question. I think from my time in the field, we rely on the driller and his overpulls. Is he seeing any trend per se? We rely on the torque and drag as our primary wind vane to tell us how things are going. There has been obviously technology from the mudlogging side with the cuttings volume meters trying to determine the mass, and they've had some success, but the issue that I see is frankly the expense and the accuracy equation or balance. It's very expensive, and from what I've seen, it's the accuracy isn't so outstanding that makes it mandatory on even deep water rigs.
Right. Well, and so for the audience that's trying to picture all this happening, I mean, and again, I'll put myself on my side of the fence here, and as a service provider in the drilling fluids world, a lot of times the mud engineer, he or she might be out on the rig shaker, or by the rig shakers, watching fluid and cuttings come across, and oftentimes, you may stand there after you're circulating, and you'll identify, again, just the characteristics of the cuttings coming across. And what that can ultimately tell you is what's happening downhole, and then you can adjust accordingly. But this is not, for like 99.9% of the time, this is not being looked at real time, or it's not being looked at on a continuous basis. It might be spot checked. It might be, you might have a camera that shows the shakers, but you're not able to really identify unless everything's just completely unloading and you've got fluid flying all over the place. But in, normal drilling operations, a lot of times you really can't identify something until you start seeing it on surface, whether, like you said, you're torquing up, or you start seeing a bunch of pressure spikes, or there's other things that are saying, hey, there's now a problem. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, we better evaluate and look. And then all of a sudden you're looking back at, whether again, Pason or whoever's data, and saying, we didn't notice this was happening. But if you look over time, we've noticed, our torque sort of increasing more than it should have. But this is a very unique solution to all that, because you're being able to visualize and characterize cuttings on a continuous basis. Like anytime you're circulating and drilling and pumping, you're able to watch and analyze what's coming over the shakers. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's really, really well summed up, Justin. I think one of the attractions that we see from the drilling engineers is to be able to go back and look at the video and the trends that the data traces, and try to correlate that to problems that this is obviously in a look back feature. But now you've got a full-time whole section of complete surveillance of the shaker and what came across. I guess the main point we're trying to bring across is a qualitative and a quantitative data trace at the shaker. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question the way.
No, really, yeah, it's just really conversational, just trying to give sort of an idea as how impactful this could be. And so let's equate this into value, and perhaps, sort of not necessarily then dollar values, but just the overall spend. If you're drilling along, and because ultimately you're trying to increase wellbore stability. And for those out there, and again, Calvin, feel free to jump in, but if you're drilling along and you start having issues downhole, and all of a sudden you get stuck, meaning you can't move the pipe up or down, that can result in, tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially if you lose your drilling BHA downhole. And so, Calvin, for you, is this a way to prevent stuff like that, or can you actually make sort of real-time decisions to help improve drilling, say ROP and hopefully trip times and all the rest of it? I mean, can you kind of give an idea? Is this like, oh, we're just doing this to prevent, or we're actually improving drilling efficiencies?
No, that's a great question, because trying to sell preventive medicine in our industry is very difficult, because it's the classic refrain, well, it never happens here.
I get that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Everybody encounters that. Fortunately, we've got insurance companies that have to insure these BHAs. And so a shout out to Chris Webb and Transpac. Might be an interesting conversation for you.
Okay.
He doesn't go into the dirty laundry about how it happened, but the point is it's close to $1 billion here in the US of lost wells. So a US land well, for drilling is in the $2 to $3 million range, and an offshore well, deep water, is over 100 million. So we like to say that we're trying to save minutes, with our solution. We call it clean site, and we're saying, hey, all it's got to do is save you a couple of minutes. And where can we save a couple of minutes? So going to your question about sort of real-time drilling optimization, the big one for me is circulation times, right? So what gets sort of stuck in my craw are all these posters about bragging rights about their awesome ROPs and these sections that they drilled so fast, and great bit design, and respect to them, right? It's a competitive world, and I get it, but nobody, and this is probably a difference with the Canadian operation, we don't get to know how long it took them to trip out of the hole, run back in, and did they actually get casing to bottom and not lose any reservoir section. We don't get that part.
Yeah.
And so on the abundance of caution, the industry will circulate, ad nauseum, 3 or 4 we're just going to keep circulating until we think it's clean. So besides the waste of money there's a lot of emissions. So if you really want to try to improve your emission reduction, you're going to make a very concerted effort to optimize those circulation times. So that's where we want to try to help out on the overall ROP, besides preventing a train wreck by hole collapse with the caving.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating. My mind didn't quite go there right away. Is, again, to your point, we're drilling 2-mile laterals faster than we ever have. But it's funny because, you like a directional company and everyone on the rig are giving high fives because they drilled a record lateral, but yet you're circulating, 4, 5, 6, 7 bottoms up. Maybe, there's some operators that'll circulate for 2 days, after drilling an ERD well, which again, it's for them, it makes sense. And it's because they maybe don't have quite the data. And, I know, and a big shout out to K&M Technologies. They've come out with, I've seen stuff from them that you can plug in your well profile and everything. And then it gives you suggested circulating times. Cause ultimately you're trying to reduce that as much as possible, but there's that fine line of, well, do we circulate an extra hour to make sure the hole's clean, or do we just yank it? And that's $1 million question oftentimes. And no one wants to be the one to say, yeah, let's yank it. And then next thing you know, you're planted halfway through the lateral because you can't get out of the hole.
You're just pumping out a hole, Justin. It's becoming normal now just to pump out, back ream or ream out of the hole, pump out a hole. So
sure.
And that takes a very long time.
It does. And again, you touched on a very good point, is while a lot of operators are making tons of effort to reduce scope 1 emissions, i.e., at the rig site, and, now we've got, e-frac and everything else. If you were to, let's say you've got Chevron's notorious for having a large rig fleet because you're drilling a ton of wells, completing a bunch of wells. Let's say you're saving 20 minutes of circulating time across the fleet. You extrapolate that over the course of a full drilling campaign. How much carbon is associated with reducing that amount of circulating time in a month? It might not be much, but you extrapolate that over the course of, say, 5 years over the entire fleet. That's a lot of emissions that you could save. And then, tie that back into, everyone talks about economics, the economics as well. And so it's fascinating. And a lot of times people have a hard time looking at the big picture. All they see is, well, how much does this cost me? And what's the day rate on this? And I don't know. It's quite a bit. So I guess how do you sort of counter that
objection, and because I would imagine that always comes down to, well, how much does this cost?
Well, that's a good point. The way we've tackled it specifically is we have this, at the end of the day, it's called early adopter pricing. And we've been very successful, to give the operators their due. They're very intrigued about the idea. And, to your audience, we need to sort of put the disclaimer that we're at the proof of concept stage. We've passed that now, and now we're going to field trials to where we want to deliver the data to a drilling team so that they can basically prove it up, and we can write case histories about how we can do all these things which we've described. But it's really a mindset on the operator side that they can see that. We have some that really want to do some road mapping and ideation type programs with us to see where this technology can go down the road, which is exciting to see folks that have, coming. At the end of the day, I'm a big believer in a team building, because we need different points of view. I didn't believe that until I was about 38. I thought I was, I knew it all and was going to be the CEO and $1 million a year by 30 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Finally matured, as my wife would like to say.
Right.
Still got some improvement opportunities.
Hey, once the improvement stops, it's over, man. You got to give yourself something to look forward to, right?
Get out of bed. Okay, how can I improve today?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's funny. I always told my dad, because I never knew what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I still feel like I don't. But I always said I want to retire by 30, and he said, "Well, you're going to be pretty bored for the next 40 or 50 years. So you better find something you love doing." Which I believe I've found, most of that, but it's, that constant, that constant push to improve, and really just getting over this, oh, well, we've done this for so long, and this is how, it's working. I think that culture shift is changing, especially since, I would say since the most recent downturn, through my experience in dealing with different operators, drilling engineers and managers primarily, there's a willingness to work together better than in the past. It was almost like, again, through my experience, is it's the service companies were at the mercy of the operators, and without the operators, we were no longer in business. Well, now the mindset from my experience is, hey, let's work together. We've helped survive some of the most chaotic times in history. We do value you as a partner, and all our service companies, we do want to make sure they stay in business, and we don't want to rake them over the coals when oil drops $6, we're not coming for concessions right away or bidding out the work. And so I say all that to say is, like, I think there's a lot more initiative to work together to overcome a lot of these challenges, because at the end of the day, like we sort of talked about in the beginning, is there's a lot of pressure on the oil and gas space to just do better, and not necessarily drill faster wells, but just gain the confidence of not only the investment community, but just the general population as a whole. And so again, to get better on all facets, I think it's going to take things like technology, and AI is a big one right now, and then talent, right? Like again, it's for us is like, we're going to these, we're having to really expand our radius with regards to talent acquisition, because for a long time, people were knocking on our door to come work. And now, we still have a lot of people wanting to come work for us as a company, but we're competing with, now arguably right now is not a good time because technology companies are laying people off left, right, and center. But, in general, a lot of people are looking to get into other industries. And so if we want the best of the best, we have to start attracting people and come work for cool companies like DrillDocs and, a lot of these other great technology and service companies that still exist today. And so, again, I just think what you guys are doing is fascinating. And so to add to that, I am coming in with a question here is, so when you guys are going to talk to companies, are you looking at partnering with like drilling contractors, or who like would this stuff would be? Like, who do you essentially work for? I mean, obviously, ultimately work for the operator, but is this going to be something that you guys are working with service companies or operators, or how do you kind of work?
Well, I want to come back to your earlier remark, because I think we need to talk about safety and competency in the industry. But to answer your question right now, our client is the operator. They're the ones that benefit the most.
Right.
So, but what's interesting is, one of the largest drilling contractors is coming out with I forgot the exact term, but performance-based contracts or something about output. I forgot the exact deal. It's just coming out recently. Okay. I think it's a new version of turnkey drilling, which I always never understood why it wasn't more popular. I mean, I understood why, because they failed at it and it was expensive and they went out of business. But,
right. Yeah.
It's interesting that the operators can do part and the drilling contractors can do part, but nobody can do it together, except maybe Southwestern. I noticed they run their own rigs. And in fact, shout out to them. They helped us get started with our initial proof of concept that we went out and bootstrapped on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, shout out to them. So I think that's really our client. Now we are talking with partnerships with our distribution. We like to think of ourselves as a SaaS company, not a service company, but we have a camera. And so we do have a hardware component that we have to take care of and maintain. But if you're asking long-term, are we going to be, 300 employees going out like K&M style, hole cleaning, wellbore stability with our camera? I don't really think that's where we need to go. It's kind of redundant. We really want to enable those folks, the mud loggers, the K&Ms of the world, the driller, giving them this unique data that they can go take away and put in their own sort of infrastructure and workflow processes to make it optimum.
Yeah, makes sense. Are you guys, is there a discussion? Now, I know you said you're sort of where you're at in the life cycle of deploying this, but do you ever have discussions about monitoring other things within the fluid system, or are you just strictly focusing on just cuttings?
Well, so I'm a wannabe entrepreneur. So this would be my third go at it. First one was, you could call it a success. I'd give myself sort of a C+. The second time around was an F. And so here I am again. And so what I've learned, Justin, is that I got to be very focused on one thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with my colors red over yellow, I'm a very visual, strategic person. And so I naturally want to just have it all done now. And all is a really big basket. So we are very focused at the shaker for cuttings characterization, autonomously. But obviously, we see the fluid. We see a lot of interesting things that can be done at that initial exit point of everything that the whole driller's been doing. So and consolidating that and making more automation through it. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure AES is thinking about the same kind of things. In fact, it'd be interesting to maybe talk to you guys about that, what we could do. So we are talking to different service companies about that, but some of it's still early days. If you don't have a patent, then nobody wants to talk to you. Certainly investors don't. So fortunately, we've got some good patent team and some good.
No, that's. Yeah. And again, I think I made a post about this on LinkedIn not too long ago. And I said, part of the success, in the future for oilfield services, whether that be SaaS or anyone servicing the well, you know what I mean? That it's going to require some strategic partnerships, leveraging each other's talent, technology, to come together. And you're starting to see it a little bit. But again, for so long, we've been, kind of, to give us our competitive advantage. We're not telling everyone our secrets, and we're going to come to your location. We're going to do our job, and then we're going to leave, and no one's going to know what we did, except for we're going to tell everyone how we drilled a record well. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, we need to come together.
That's a bit of a different mindset from I think the Canadian side, right? Because the government mandated all of this information to be shared.
Yeah.
And I remember from my underbalanced drilling days, we were able to get really good reservoir characterization type information that allowed us to do that kind of work to qualify these candidate wells, which you could never get in the States. That would, they'd shoot you before they share it. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's so funny story. When I started with the CES, which is the company that owns AES, I I started off as a tech, and part of my job was to go through drilling reports and do offset reviews for operators that were drilling in an area. And so I'd be downtown, I'd hop on the C train, which is a public transit, and I would go and I would go to the OGC, the Alberta Oil and Gas Commission, and I would pull 10, 15 offset wells, and they would come out with these stacks of IEDC reports, and I would go photocopy them all and then take this another big stack back to the office and go through every day's drilling reports. And I say all that not to, look at me, but the point I'm making is I could look at a target location. I could do a 5-mile radius, and any single well that was drilled, regardless of who it was, unless it was maybe like a province well for some science stuff, but 99.9% of the time, I could get all the well information and do a sound offset review to give to the operator, to which then they knew who the well was drilled by, any occurrences that happened at which depth. I mean, I could literally see the whole fingerprint of that well. Coming down here, it was like you had to talk to so-and-so who might know so-and-so who might be able to get you a drill bit record. And I'm like, what do you mean?
It's behind a big paywall, Justin. These, it used to be Rushmore. IHS has this stuff where the operators will get together, and so they'll talk to each other about performance. And, we want to be in the upper 25% quartile, things like that. And I was part of that when it was Chevron days, on the offshore side, where we would share lessons learned. And there was some just catastrophic stuff, which help share how not to do that. But my big bug is, until the industry shares this kind of NPT stuff, non-productive time, and make it more public, I don't really think they're that serious as an industry to become as efficient as they can, because they're not enabling the service contractors the way they could.
Yeah, no, the access to information is critical. And so, I don't know at what point that'll turn, if any, but I think it'll just take service companies willing to share their information perhaps and come together. And so what that looks like, I don't know, but it is a challenge. And again, it's interesting because a lot of the people that I talk to agree that this is a problem, and are willing to step out and say, I would be willing to share my information, but would you? I don't know. I don't know if people would put their money where their mouth is a lot of times.
I think our capitalist system, our competitive system, just precludes from that happening, and unfortunately, we have to be regulated to make things like that happen. And I mean, what we've seen on the ESG side with the SEC coming in. They want us to report our emissions, but they're not asking us to report our non-productive time and all the let's say FUBARs that we do out there.
Right.
And if they were really serious about it, they'd take a harder look at how efficient is the industry, and what are you as an industry doing about it, to become truly sustainable.
Well, maybe we just don't have the right people in those positions of power.
Well, it's generation, right? It's generational. Guys like you are going to be the ones, and this kind of podcast kind of brings it out. And eventually the younger, I'm an internal optimist. I think we will get better. We always get better. Yeah. It's just some people take it slow, and, that's look at SpaceX. I mean, my goodness, why can't we be like SpaceX for drilling? Why can't we have folks thinking like that? And for some of the big stuff.
Yeah. Well, Elon, if you're listening, when you have SpaceX drilling division, I forget who I was talking to, someone on the directional side. I said, you need to reach out to Tesla and figure out if they can get you a long lasting battery, because God forbid the battery life is getting low and you've got 68 feet to drill. Right. you need to get there and your battery dies. I said, man, think about that, so-and-so motors powered by Tesla. Next, you know what I mean? I don't know, but we don't have a Tesla of the drilling world. Maybe you can fill those boots, Calvin. I don't know, but hopefully someone steps up to the plate here and
well, we used to, right? Back in the day when we first went offshore, and Kerr-McGee. I mean, there's some cutting edge stuff that we've done. It's just lately we seem to have kind of, I don't know, gotten a rut. Maybe digitalization is going to be that, but
do you suspect it's perhaps due to the cyclical nature of the industry, and people are, and we just lack the investment and long-term thinking, because we're measured, a lot, let's, call it publicly trading companies every 90 days on our financials. but then, they know 3 to 4 years that there's going to be a downturn. So then it's like, well, why would we invest so much for the future? Why don't we invest right now for like the most immediate return on invested capital? Because in 6 years, we may be, all these rigs that we're trialing all this fancy stuff on are going to be laid down in the weeds somewhere. Do you think that has part of it?
Well, it's our boom bust cycle, right? It's when people recognize an opportunity, our system goes out there and it's hell bent to get it happen. Come hell or high water, the consequences after. I think as we become are we a sunset industry? Some people would say so. I think it's a bit too early to say that, but we certainly are a lot more mature. And it's like any person, we're finally getting smart about how we spend our money. I think, and that's where, again, we've learned that. You guys went through that, in a hard way. I did too. I've got a good, maybe, 10 years left to really contribute to the industry. Where all the younger ones that went through, they're going to remember this. And so I think we will be more socially responsible and fiscally responsible. So I think it's good for us. We learn from it. We're smart. We pick it up.
Yep. No, I'm with you.
Mistake too many times.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, Calvin, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we just scratched the surface, but before we close out, I do like to end with some stuff on the personal side of things. You seem pretty adventurous. You've traveled overseas and stuff like that, but I mean, what's something about yourself that not many people know about? I mean, do you have any sort of unique hobbies, or when you're not, if you got to go, that's fine, but anything unique that you'd like to release to the podcast world here? I mean, what you talked about food.
I guess as much as I said, I've loved the industry. It's meant a lot to me. Besides just growing up in it with the parents and the wonderful time we had, we were quite privileged, and I was able to just keep going with it. And it brought me to Italy, where I met my wife, who's trying to teach me Italian and is still failing miserably. I'm her work student.
Okay.
My son was born there, so I have a big love for Italy, and they have a good job. They do a good job of work-life balance. So I would recommend everybody needs to go to Italy at least once. Some people don't like it. I get it. It's a different place, but it's a big part of my life.
Well, my wife and I were privileged to go to Rome and had an absolute amazing time. I filled my belly with as much pasta as I possibly could, but it was just amazing. The culture, the people. Again, I would second that. It's such a unique place, and I'd love to explore it more. But with that said, Calvin, appreciate everything. What's the best way for folks to reach out to get to know more about DrillDocs, or even if they want to connect with you and if they have some questions regarding anything we talked about today? And I'll put your link in the show notes, but is there any place that people can reach out?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best part. I pretty much accept anybody that's got oil and gas in their profile. So be happy to chat.
Awesome.
So thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. You bet, Calvin. And for the listeners, always remember that everyone deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.